You're listening to the HawgBeat Hour with Andrew Hutchinson, Alex Trader, and Mason Choate on ESPN Arkansas and HitThatLine.com. Now, here's your host, Mason Choate.
All right, we got a quick HawgBeat reaction. Arkansas changes their starting rotation for the first time on the year, so it's not going to be Nolan, Hagen Smith, and Jackson Wiggins this time around against Alabama. It's going to be Will McEntire Thursday night. That's tonight. And then it's going to be Connor Nolan on Friday night, Jackson Wiggins on Saturday. Hutch, instant reaction. I feel like there's kind of been maybe a little bit of this might happen, but it was never really said. And now we have it. You were kicking yourself because you didn't ask Dave Van Horn about it. What do you think?
Yeah, that's my first reaction was, oh my gosh, this is the first week, probably all season, that either myself or one of the other media people did not ask Dave Van Horn, hey, are you sticking with the same rotation? Because it sounds, based on what I've heard from some people, that maybe this has been in the works since Monday, that Will McEntire knew that he was going to be getting the game one start. So definitely a miss on our part as the media, but it makes a lot of sense if you really dive into it, although I am still surprised. I mean, you've gone 13 straight weeks with the same starting rotation, and then boom, you change it for the last weekend of the regular season. But, Hagen Smith has struggled a little bit lately, hasn't worked deep into games most of the time. Especially, I think his struggles away from Baum-Walker Stadium are well documented. But I also don't think it's necessarily all just because, Hagen's been bad, he needs to be replaced. I also think there's value in, one, leaving Connor Nolan on Fridays, so that helps keep your ace kind of on normal rotation, since this series does start on Thursday. And then plus, Will McEntire has pitched really, really well of late, including in SEC play. He's been really good all year. I think he's got an ERA under 2. He has walked some more guys than maybe he did back in 2020, whenever we first got a glimpse of him. But in SEC play, he's gone 3 innings or so, or 3+ innings in his 2 SEC appearances, and hasn't walked anybody. So that's really encouraging to see. And he got to basically have a start this past Sunday when he threw the final 3 innings of Game 2 that was postponed until Sunday against a really good Vanderbilt team. So that kind of made it not surprising. Plus, the next week we've got the SEC tournament coming up, and that starts on, assuming Arkansas gets, if they finish with a 4 seed, they'll start on Wednesday. And so that's another day up. So maybe you would have, if you don't have to use Hagen Smith this weekend, which he is on the trip and he is available to pitch. But if he doesn't have to, and you can get through this weekend without using him, boom, you've got your game 1 starter in the SEC tournament, and that's going to be better than a lot of teams, honestly. So it makes some sense, but it is still a little bit surprising to see the change come for the final weekend of the regular season.
Yeah, so the way I look at it is Hagen Smith, he struggled on the road. You're playing an Alabama team that, they're kind of fighting for their lives, but I think that if there's any series that you can kind of make this decision where we're gonna change some things up, see what we can do, play with it a little bit, it is against Alabama. And heading into Hoover, like, you've got a little bit of room to work around with things. And I think, as you mentioned, Will McEntire, he's been great. I mean, he hasn't shown that he doesn't deserve this. All he's done is prove that he does. And so for Hagen Smith, it's a little tough because, yes, he has struggled on the road. And then last weekend against Vanderbilt, it was one of the first times that we really saw him he didn't really have it at home at Baum-Walker. And so I'm curious, do you think that this is more of we're going to give Hagen Smith some rest, or more of Will McEntire has shown it to us and we're going to throw him instead?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that may be a cheap answer, but I think it's honestly the truth, just because, I thought a couple of weeks ago that Hagen Smith might need some rest. I thought maybe he might be hitting that freshman wall that we always talk about, because the dude's incredibly talented. I mean, there was a reason he was a top 100, top 75 recruit coming out of high school, and he'll probably turn down some good money to come to school in the first place. And he had some really good moments early on, especially at home. But for him to come out and kind of wear down like he did, because he didn't start out terrible. I mean, I think he threw a couple of decent innings against Vanderbilt, and then he just kind of fell apart there in the third inning, I want to say. And that's kind of what you see whenever you see a guy just kind of getting worn down. And I know Dave Van Horn said earlier this week that, the guys aren't tired or getting worn down or anything like that, that their bullpens look good. But you can't help but wonder, okay, this guy is a freshman. He's pitched 13 straight weeks in the toughest conference in college baseball, and he might just be getting a little bit tired. Maybe he needs a week off. And I thought that might happen against Vandy. Maybe they didn't do it just because Vandy is, such a good team. You're trying to really win that series, and as you said, Alabama is not quite that level. So maybe you have a little bit more flexibility. Throw in the fact that Will McEntire has looked good against really good SEC teams in Auburn and Vanderbilt. Might as well give him a shot against an Alabama team for his first SEC start. I'm anxious to see how he does, because it's a big spot for him, and I know that he's probably really excited. He's an in-state kid, really wants to be here because he redshirted last year. After he looked good, showed promises in 2020, COVID hit, and then he didn't pitch at all last year. And sometimes you see guys after that, they hit the road. They're like, okay, well, I'm not going to play here, so I'm going to move on. But he didn't do that. He stuck it out, and even halfway through this season, he hadn't pitched, and he stuck it out. So it's hard not to root for a guy like that, an in-state kid who finally gets his chance and then makes the most of it.
So the decision to not start Hagen Smith this weekend, I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think? I mean, if you were the coach and you didn't know that this decision had already been made, is Hagen Smith the guy that you wouldn't start between Nolan, Smith, and Wiggins? Because there's a story that I just wrote over at HawgBeat.com talking about how Nolan has struggled, Wiggins struggled at times. He's doing a little bit better. Smith has struggled. So it's not like Hagen Smith is the only starter that has had some rough times recently. Is it Smith the guy that you would take out?
I think so, because Nolan's. I think it's just a matter of just kind of a little bit of a mini slump. I mean, he's been your most consistent guy all year, even with his struggle starts the last couple of outings. He still has good numbers for the year. And with Jackson Wiggins, he's actually been trending in a positive direction. I mean, you mentioned it in your story that's up on HawgBeat that he's actually had a couple of solid outings for a Game 3 starter. Like, yeah, he's not going to go out there and give you 7 scoreless like an SEC ace, but he's your Game 3 starter. You don't really need that. Like, that would be great, but that's not what you're expecting. You just expect a guy to be able to get you into a game and give you a chance to win, and he's done that the last 2 weekends. And then in Hagen, as I said, I think he's hitting that freshman wall. And being a freshman, and not necessarily being used to this kind of grind, week in, week out, against really tough competition. I think maybe a week off would do him some good, or maybe it's just like a short kind of bullpen outing where he throws 3 innings in relief or something. Maybe that would be good for him. Or as I said, maybe he just doesn't pitch at all, and boom, he's ready to go, refreshed for Game 1 in Hoover.
Yeah. So last thing here, going into the postseason, which would start in Hoover, do you think that this is something that they're thinking, well, we're going to try this out, and if it works going into regionals and possibly super regionals, this is the rotation that we want to go with: McEntire, Nolan. It might switch up the days, but those 3 guys, Nolan, McEntire, and Wiggins, rather than having Smith there.
I think it all depends on how it goes this weekend, and I think it depends on how it goes with Smith and his next outing, whether that be this weekend out of the bullpen or next week in Hoover. I think it just kind of depends on how they do. I mean, if Will McEntire goes out there and throws 6 scoreless innings or something against Alabama, it would be hard for me to take them out of the rotation. Same thing if Nolan and Wiggins, assume they pitch well. And honestly, it's not a bad thing to have a 4th starter that could give you really solid innings. Maybe, if you get Will McEntire proven that he can give you multiple innings, can go multiple times to the order, and maybe he's a guy that can move back to the bullpen, but be kind of that long reliever, kind of like Jake Reindl was back in 2018. That's a guy I keep bringing up because he was such a key piece on that 2018 team that people forget about as a guy that could, if Isaiah Campbell went out and bombed in the first inning, well, boom, here comes Jake Reindl. He gives you 7 innings. If you could have a guy like that in the bullpen, that's massive. And maybe maybe that could be Will McEntire, or maybe it's even Hagen Smith. Who knows? But if one of those guys could develop into that, that would be huge. But I don't think anything. I think everything right now is still very much up in the air. Dave Van Horn has kind of shown that with how much he's changed around his lineup. It's been like a constant movement from game to game, and now we're starting to see it a little bit on the rotation as well. That he's kind of mixing things up and trying to make things work. Maybe it pays off and they find the right magical combination. They're able to make a deep run in the postseason, but they're still looking for that magical combination.
All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see with McEntire on Thursday. That is tonight when we're recording this. Game starts at 6 on the SEC Network Plus. And if you want to keep up with all of that, you can go to HawgBeat.com. We got the HawgBeat scoreboard that'll be going. That'll keep you updated on any scores that happen. And if you're subscribed, you can be on the trough. We will keep you updated with play-by-play of the game. And then also Hutch's key takeaway stories as well. So go to HawgBeat.com. And you'll get all that Razorback baseball coverage. But that's going to wrap it up for us here on this HawgBeat reaction episode.